I've talked a nauseating amount about bad Mortal Kombat features lately to the point where I've filled entire lists, so I thought I'd make a list of good features too? No. But I thought I'd discuss one of them in particular, one that everyone and their pet Shih Tzu love. That feature is fighting styles. People who play the 3D games love fighting styles. People who never touch the 3D games love fighting styles. That's how good it is. It's just one of those ideas that as soon as you hear of it, you go, dude! However, it's also surprisingly flimsy when you eye it up close, and it doesn't stand close scrutiny as a gameplay mechanic, mostly because it isn't one. Let me explain. But first, let's go over the positives and why this feature is so beloved by so many. First of all, everyone loves martial arts. You can debunk them, show how useless they are in a real street fight, humiliate a 20-year black belt with a 20-inch cock slap to the face, it doesn't matter. There's too much pop culture that reveres these things for people to not like them, plus we're naturally drawn to things that look aesthetically pleasing, and martial arts sure as shit do. Second of all, it adds to the personality of the fighters. Now I know that Nightwolf isn't just some random Native American hobo who whacks heads with a stone on a stick. He's some random Native American hobo who whacks heads with a stone on a stick and knows Taekwondo. And sarcasm aside, that one simple addition of flavor text implies a lot and inquires a lot. It implies he's more sophisticated than he might appear. It shows he's good with his legs and has a predilection towards that kind of fighting, which in turn can imply that he likes to keep his foes at legs length rather than arm's length, and maybe he does the same with his allies because he's a loner, or maybe not. Okay, that was a stretch. A leg stretch. And it also inquires a lot, makes you ask questions, like how, when, where did he learn the style? Is it some modified version of Taekwondo, passed down from his forebears? Is it not a style and just happens to be the way he taught himself to fight that just happens to resemble Taekwondo, but a more raw, perhaps less refined version of it? Or was there a time when Nightwolf actually visited the world he's part of, fraternized with its denizens, attended a dojo, and learned the formal style from a legit master? It makes you wonder all this, and that's a good thing. And it's a really cool thing for MK specifically because you let the fighting, the thing that the series is actually known for, communicate things about the characters, preferences, predilections, personality traits. That's fucking cool and fucking appropriate. Kinda like Star Signs but less gay. It also serves to ground Mortal Kombat into the real world in a very cool way. Before, these were just pixelated schmucks throwing random punches at each other, but now, it's more than just random punches. It's legit fighting systems that are thousands of years old in our real world and have been painstakingly developed and refined ever since. It makes these characters feel a bit more real, brings them over into our world, and at the same time, this is the flip side, it mystifies the real-world martial arts. Makes them seem like not just this plain, boring byproduct of history, but also like something ethereal and magical. Not just some performance arts developed by a few long-dead peasants who had nothing better to do with their time and just happened to be passed down and survived the ages, but more like what martial arts market themselves as, like these ancient, mystical arts that were practiced by gods and sorcerers and grant you near superhuman feats. The late 90s and early 2000s were a special time when people had that feeling on full blast in their brains. Everything was mystical, magical, mescalinable. It makes the game world more tangible and it mystifies our own tangible world, which is something we always appreciate. It takes these real world concepts and applies them to the IP's lore, which is a fantastic thing. Avatar did the same. It applied quaint concepts and old bits of wisdom to the lore of the world and made them intrinsic to it. Stuff like chakras, meditation, Buddhist concepts, the Avatar idea itself, and of course, martial arts also, which became the basis for the bending arts in the show. Take a mostly cultural and performative thing from the real world and give it actual functionality, mystifying it in the process. Avatar is like the gold standard when it comes to crafting lore and applying all this stuff. It does everything Mortal Kombat can hope to do and then some. And lastly, it also tries to provide some optionality to the players, which is something players will always want. Do you prefer quick hand-to-hand strikes, or are you more of a weapon stance guy, hacking away at your opponent's pecs/tits? Fighting styles look like they give you options, things to choose from, which allows you to form preferences for one particular style over another. And I'm sure back in the day, some people would pick characters based on the fighting styles they sported, be it because they looked cool or because the players themselves practiced those styles and thus now identified with these characters more. But this last point is also what segues to the problem? No. Downside? No. Limitation of fighting styles as they were implemented then. They're just flavor text. Beyond the names and the fact that they reference real-world martial arts, and beyond the visual appeal of seeing the devs do their research and painstakingly program the fighters to mimic the real things, if we move away from the visual side of this feature over to purely the gameplay side, what we find is not that this is a bad gameplay mechanic or a flimsy gameplay mechanic. No, it's just not a gameplay mechanic. at all. How can you say that? It's like, look at all this stuff. I mean, it's 3 whole movesets in one. No, it's one big moveset. You could just as well have done away with the toggle between styles and crammed them all together, assigned to various button combinations, although that would have been cumbersome as hell. But there's no drawback to switching styles. You do it on the fly. Even if you switch styles mid-combo, you can just switch back as soon as it's done. You can use all of them, you can use one of them. Some characters' weapon styles are OP, you'll probably use those more. That doesn't mean you commit to using that style in any way that the game will acknowledge. You still have access to all those other moves, you are just not using them. The same way you have a bunch of useless strings in the NRS games and you don't use those either. They're all just one big moveset with some flavor text added to it. They're less so part of gameplay features and more part of the presentation. It's not a gameplay mechanic that enforces a choice on the player and a change in the state of the game. Meter is a gameplay mechanic. You build up a bar of meter through specific actions, you spend a bar of meter to gain a particular advantage or effect, and the bar depletes. It's a commitment. You have to commit to using it and then it's gone. And it does something that influences the gameplay. Fighting styles don't. All 3 styles have pop-ups, all 3 styles have high damage combos, all 3 styles are always available to you and you don't gain or lose anything from using one style over the other, nor does any one style have particular unique properties compared to the others, not for the most part. Oh, and by the way, before you start comparing this to variations, variations are most definitely a gameplay mechanic because you have to commit to one variation over the other 2. With fighting styles, you don't. Now, I should point out that this is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't erase how cool of an idea it is. There's nothing wrong with adding cool flavor text and cool looking animations. It doesn't need to be any more than this. So this isn't a critique. At the same time, what if it was more than this? What if it was an actual gameplay mechanic in every sense of the word? What would that look like? How would you go about turning it into one? What would make sense for this kind of feature? One idea is that different fighting styles could have different properties. One style could be long range, the other style could be short range but deal more damage, so you're at least incentivized to switch from one to the other in different situations. One of Kung Lao's styles could be something like the Snake style, with rapid, zappy strikes that have short startup, while the other could be his traditional Wing Chun type multiple punch barrage that's good at armor breaking. It's not much, but it's a start. The con here is that you still don't need a formal style switch button. You can just include all of these in one moves list, which might be better honestly. When you fight for realsies, you don't go, okay, now I gotta think judo. I can only do judo. Okay, now I'm shotokan. I am shotokan. Okay, back to judo. And now I'm gonna get my shit pushed in. No, you're much more fluid with the moves you use and mix and match them on the fly. But of course, a lot of people probably want to have a toggle button. That's kind of part of the appeal, to have access to one style in a more tangible way than just a couple strings here and there. And there's all these action films that treat things this formally, where characters literally adopt different stances and stick to them for a while.
Tiger, Panzer, Jiu-Jitsu.
And if we want to go for something like that, then we can have players commit to a style through resources or apply various conditions. Maybe changing styles requires you to spend a bar, or maybe it depletes your stamina bar, or maybe it's something as simple as Metallic Tremor's dedicated stance switch move, which means you can't just change styles willy-nilly. It has to be at the end of a combo, a setup, or just during neutral when you're less likely to get punished for it, because the move does have some recovery on it. Maybe it comes with a cooldown. Yes, the dreaded cooldown mechanic that I despise and humiliate every chance I get, because I also mentioned that cooldowns do have their place in certain scenarios, and that the less crucial and basic the mechanic to which it's attached is, the better. Switching styles seems like it fits that description. You play the game as you would normally, and then make the commitment to swap out your attacks for others and stick to those a while. And it could be any combination of these requirements, depending on how powerful the styles end up being. Could cost a bar and incur a cooldown, could cost just time, could just have a very long animation so you only have so many opportunities to do it. And by the way, this is a cool way to do variations too. To make players feel less bad about having to pick one variation and sticking to it for the entire match, you could allow them to switch variations mid-round, but have it cost quite a bit, like 2 bars of meter, a long-ass cooldown, so you'd probably have to stick with it for the rest of the round, and a long animation to boot, so you'd have to be strategic about when you go for the variation switch. The game would also have to have a slightly slower pace than MKX, because rounds there end so quickly it's not worth bothering with something like this. Now, of course, the drawback with this method is it's very video gamey. You don't have to commit to anything in real life. If you know 2 martial arts, you know 2 martial arts. You can use them both interchangeably, freely, whenever, however you want. So this definitely suffers a lot on the common sense front. But then people will also cite the classic, "It's just a game, bruh." It ain't that deep, so I don't think many people would pay attention to this aspect. It's literally just me. Circling back to the first option a bit, I don't quite like this, but I should mention it anyway. You could implement the first methods, but on steroids, whereby styles apply debuffs, like Ermac's Choi Li Foot, Chun-Li foot looks like one of those chakra blocking martial art thingies that like blocks off your blood vessels or whatever, so that could apply a debuff to your special moves, lengthening their startup and recovery frames for a short time, like 5 to 10 seconds. Basically making them slower is what I'm saying. You could use that style against zoners, try to get close to someone like Pyromancer Tanya long enough to grope her titties with a couple of these attacks. Then, if she gets away, it's much easier to chase her down for a short while because her fireballs now take ages to come out. It would also work well against cancel characters, like Hellfire Scorpion or Dragon's Fire Liu, who would have to stop it with the fireball cancels after getting hit because they'd now be way too slow to extend pressure with, and you could interrupt them with a wet trout. Now, I'm kinda wary of buffs and debuffs generally because it's the gateway to ruining your fucking game, the way ARPGs and MMOs love to do. 4% damage bonus versus visually impaired enemies during a full moon, which synergizes with Blessing of the Bulging Ballsack, which applies the camel toe state that increases the critical hit chance against feminists by 4% during a women's rights protest between the hours of 2 and 4 on a Saturday. There's so many mental gymnastics for so little visual payoff. It's just a bunch of buff effects that don't have any immediate impact. Casting a spell on an army that reduces range damage by 40% is the single least exciting thing I can think of in any video game ever. Watching two parties stack multicolored buffs and debuffs on each other like they're children at a paintball match pretending to kill each other and seeing no immediate effect other than different numbers popping out of them and relying on nothing but your inner thoughts to derive satisfaction that you were a good boy and correctly applied all the buffs is the biggest exercise in intellectual masturbation that I can think of. It does have its place, but that place is generally in pen and paper games where we have no graphics and game engines and have to rely on numbers and status effects. Which is not to say I don't indulge in this kind of video game wankery from time to time. It is enjoyable for a while in limited amounts, but it always ends up leaving me a little bit empty and unsatisfied, like your mom. If you are to implement something like this, it thus needs to be heavily reined in, extremely minimal use, and only things that have immediate visual impact, like messing up your frame data, disabling specials altogether, some damage over time. None of this takes 0.2% extra damage from overheads performed mid-screen with the left hand type bullshit. And even then, you run the risk of the gameplay becoming one big debuff clusterfuck, where too many status effects are applied too often and no one gets to just pilot their damn character as is for 5 fucking seconds. So again, not the biggest fan of this option, but it is an option, so worth mentioning. A slightly more elegant option would be to choose one style per round. Just like how you have to choose your character and their variation before the match, you would also have to decide which fighting style you choose to tackle which round with, which would add a bit of a waging or betting dimension to the game, as well as up the strategic decision-making required. Do I lead with my kickboxing in the first round and abuse my long-range kicks with high pushback to force them into the corner, and then do I switch to judo for the second round to keep him there and grapple his ass to death? Or the other way around? Admittedly, it's a very binary choice, but it's not meant to be that deep anyway, because then it becomes like analysis paralysis. If you add a third weapon style in the game, then it's even more choices. It's kind of like how you pick your 3-character team in King of Fighters and have to stick to that order, come what may, or how you have to choose which decks to keep and which to veto in a trading card game. It adds to that tournament kind of vibe, which is pretty cool. Speaking of weapon styles, these could also make a return. My instinct is to keep it to just 2 hand-to-hand styles per character and not fuck about with weapons, because it just doesn't make any sense to pull a battle axe out of your ass mid-fight, like, why didn't you do that earlier, you idiot? But the truth is, there's more MK characters who have weapons than who don't, and many of them are inextricably tied to these implements, to the point where you can't really design the characters without them. Like you would never in a million years design a fanless katana or a psi-less Melina. They're a packaged deal. Now, weapons in general are their own big discussion for another video, but for the purposes of this one, in relation to fighting styles specifically, you could keep the weapons as a third style, but you could get disarmed. That is right, we're bringing back MK4 weapons, baby. Weapon styles could be disabled by disarming people with specific attacks or combinations of attacks. Because the problem with MK4 was that people got disarmed way too easily. Anything more than a slap to the face made the characters wince like whiny bitches and immediately drop their weapons like they just broke a nail or something.
Dropped at the first sign of trouble.
So I figure let's make weapon styles a little sturdier than that, such that you can take some serious hits without dropping them, but you should still be able to drop them. Now, what the exact mechanism behind it should be debated and tested extensively to find the right balance between too easy or too hard to disarm. It could be something as complex as a 9-hit or more combo that ends with a hard knockdown or a special move, or something as simple as an uppercut. It would depend on how often uppercuts end up getting used in the meta. I'm not sure what they're like nowadays, but back in MKX their frequency was almost perfectly balanced, whereby you occasionally saw them as anti-airs or the odd stray hit to counter a high attack or just as a YOLO move, but they were also mindless enough such that seasoned players that knew what they were doing wouldn't try to abuse them much. That said, MKX also fucked it up by making some characters' uppercuts have damn near 0 frame startup, a hitbox the length of a school bus, not that much recovery, and then would even sometimes glitch and connect to your face when they're not supposed to, which definitely made some uppercuts far more abusable than others for no adequately explored reason. And the prevalence of high attacks in MK games also promotes uppercut abuse at all but the pro level, so that would need to be looked into as well. The question is, can you pick up dropped weapons off the ground like you did in MK4, or once they're down, they're down? Because the truly wild thing could be to allow not just you to pick your own weapon back up, but your opponent to be able to pick it up as well. Now, to keep it simple, because your opponent isn't proficient at using a quarterstaff or whatever it may be, like you are, the only thing they can do is pick it up and throw it at you as a one-time use high damage projectile, just like the stones and skulls in MK4. It'd be cool to see Kitana pick up Melina's size and throw him at her face, or Sub throw Scorpion's sword at his during a high-octane fight. Another cool detail could be that if you're Kitana picking up your own fans, you could grab them from like half a yard away by airbending them into your hands, showcasing Kitana's air affinity, keeping the character's abilities consistent, making it slightly easier for her to claim back her own weapons as opposed to the opponent, and it's also just a cool way to animate it. The limitation of all this is how the fuck do you code a Kung Lao without his hat? It's baked into almost all of his moves. Same with the girls. What, Kitana can't spam projectiles anymore because she dropped her fans? The act of spamming projectiles is in itself dropping her fans. I think I need an aspirin. I was gonna delete this whole weapon segment, but decided to leave it in just to showcase how game design isn't as easy as us plebs make it out to be. So yeah, criticize game devs all you want, I know I do, but acknowledge that no one wants to make a bad game. It's just freaking hard. Every seemingly good thing you implement seems to affect 3 other things negatively. I think part of the reason why we haven't seen fighting styles make a comeback is because it's hard to justify so many strings. Because what usually ends up happening is we lab new characters, try out all the new moves, filter down to about 40% of them or so, sometimes even less, and just use those moves competitively because the rest have no utility. Because it's hard to give utility to 100 strings. You need a couple quick jabs with low startup, a couple good mids, a good low overhead mix-up if the character sports one, and that's pretty much it. A lot of the other strings end up overlapping each other, like how MKX Reptile's forward 3 back 4 overlaps with his back 3 4, except it has worse frame data. I don't understand why it's in there. Putting all that work into dozens of strings for multiple styles just so players could then use a fraction of them seems like a waste. And the real challenge has always been providing enough utility to as many attacks as possible without them overlapping functions, which is tough. But the topic is still worth discussing, and fighting styles are a fun puzzle to try to figure out. Perhaps these solutions really would be better applied to variations rather than fighting styles, allowing you to switch them during the match. Imagine using Kobujutsu Tanya to get up close and mix the opponent, deal the lion's share of the damage, then switch to Pyromancer and commit to zoning for the rest of the round. That kind of thing could be fun. Let me know what you think about this mental mess of mine, and don't forget to switch from the common style to the like style to the subscribe style, and cast the share buff while you're at it. Or not. Do whatever. I ain't your mom. I do your mom. Special thanks to Thomas Marshall, Serhi Hrishin, Clocks, as well as my other members for being irresponsible enough with their spending to support the channel.